What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be taking a look over here at the Bitcoin price chart, along with the XRP price chart, coming off of this weekend's backtest of Bitcoin off $112,000, pinpoint nailing the peak from back there in May. It's been a difficult guess on where Bitcoin could land in any type of ABC correction up in here. An idea presented back on July 11th was that we would see that area get tested there for Bitcoin. So now we've nailed it. Hopefully that was good enough there for Bitcoin so we can continue our march forward into a parabola. We'll, of course, see how the stock market reacts today coming off of last Friday. It was kind of chaotic with all the different narratives that were happening. We had the Trump trade deadline hit. We had really bad employment data and revised employment data. There was talk of Trump moving different submarines in response to Russia stuff. And of course, we're coming off of the Fed being like, blah, 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 I don't know anything, rather than giving the market the forward guidance that it's looking for a rate cut at the next meeting, which it now prices at an 85% chance that we will see one on September 17th. But of course, Jerome Powell had his classic, I don't know anything about anything. So we'll see how markets react once they open today. But in this video, I actually wanted to focus more on XRP. But while not a popular narrative for the XRP community, the reality is all of this stuff matters for the XRP price chart because the price of XRP tends to move in environments where it's favorable in the crypto market, and Bitcoin tells that story. So we'll keep our eyes on Bitcoin this week, and you would think the main focus here would be on the actual XRP USD price chart, but it's actually not going to be. Yes, my thoughts still are we're heading all the way up here to like $8, $9 for the XRP price chart, but the timing of this breakout to happen is likely going to come in conjunction with Bitcoin being able to get out of here as well. But to reiterate my confidence and my conviction on why we will still see that for XRP is we're actually going to peek at a couple of different pairings. We're going to look at Bitcoin versus XRP, XRP or XRP BTC as most people are used to looking at it, but from the inverse perspective. And we'll also look at the total market cap of crypto versus XRP. And then we'll incorporate in a couple of other charts to show you how all of this is the appearances of distribution. And I'll show you examples of that. And that all of this is the appearances of distribution for the XRP versus BTC price chart. However, we have this inverted. If you go back to standard scale, which everyone is looking at, that of course means this entire range is accumulation, attempting to get a breakout to these price levels up here, where I speculate the real resistance will be. But this chart right here, this is the total market cap of crypto versus the price of XRP. Now, for people who are newcomers to this market, this may not look familiar to you, but anybody who has been here for years, or think back to Bitcoin in 2021, does this look familiar to you at all? Does this particular price action trigger any type of memories of where the market was at the time when something like this happened? Reflecting back on maybe things like this, another push, waddling, one more attempt, and then back down into these levels. Does that trigger anything? Well, sure. That's exactly what the distribution on the top of Bitcoin looked like back in 2021, back in October and in November. Right here, there's a breakout. There's the waddling, one more attempt, and then back in. That's where we are right now for XRP versus the total market cap of crypto over the course of the last 6 years. We are back in there waiting for the bigger break to come and leave these price levels behind for XRP versus the total market cap. It's clear as day, typical distribution. But of course, this is not what people are used to. They're used to looking at it from the other lens, where we look more like that, right? For anybody who's looked at like the XRP versus BTC chart, this is more the angle that you're used to looking at the market in. But another example of that is Binance Coin from back in 2023 and 2024. This is a very clear accumulation schematic happening in here, just like we've had over here on the XRP versus BTC chart, and that your current phase that you'd be working on is your sign of strength phase. Essentially in accumulation, that you're in your sign of strength phase after already having your spring phase, your settling climax, automatic rally, secondary test, and phase B spring, and you're back in your sign of strength on accumulation. Maybe you're thinking, well, we're flipping and flopping these words of distribution and accumulation. It's really just for visuals, right? This is still the exact same thing that we're talking about here. And we can flip this to the inverse as well to look at it from that perspective too. That this is where you are for XRP versus BTC currently right now. Again, you're used to this structure, but to remove those biases of price action and look at it from just a more realistic approach, this is where we are at. And if you were to look at it through the lens of being distribution, to remove those biases, where would you be in here? You would be in your sign of weakness, trying to wait for that move to the downside. You've done every portion of Wyckoff in here, and we're now just working on that big moment of that big break to end up coming after the sign of weakness is completed, which was also the case for Binance over here, which will put us back to what you're used to looking at. And we'll put XRP BTC back to what you're used to looking at. That this is a full-blown accumulation schematic that inevitably breaks out. And I've yet to see one that did end up doing just this. And if you remember back in 2021, as we watched Bitcoin, we did acknowledge this as it was happening back in late 2021, that this was peaking very similarly to like what we saw back in 2018 on this distribution schematic that was happening in here, where these were kind of the same things, right? That these schematics ultimately led to a breakdown, which I'm just trying to show you these from the opposite angle to remove those price biases that we all have in here. Because if you were to look at this chart right here, you would sit here and say, this is a bearish chart. You would be saying, this is not good. This thing is going to break down, and it's going to break down in a big way. And that we have all phases in here that eventually go for that and go for that break to the downside. But the reason why we look at it from the inverse perspective is to remove that emotional response that we have to see that it's actually bullish. And it's actually bullish, right? That this is a full-blown accumulation schematic that has happened in here, now awaiting the breakout. But it's been a while since we've done these things from the inverse perspective. And for those who were here in 2021, when we were approaching the top of Bitcoin, we actually did this a lot to try to remove those biases, because people were really thinking Bitcoin was going to 100K, 250K back in 2021, but it was like, hey, maybe not. Like, there's going to still be a new high, but it's like not going to be as crazy as people think it is. And I showed that by using a lot of inverse perspective charts, because it removes a lot of those just crazy biases that we do have. But also we can do that with other charts as well. And like if we look at the XRP versus BTC price chart from this inverse perspective, rather than the same way you've looked at it for the last 6 years, you could sit here and clearly see all the distribution schematics happening in here if we looked at it from the upside down perspective. You have the preliminary supply that ends up showing up in here, the climax, the automatic rally, the secondary test, sign of weakness in phase B, up thrust after distribution, and the sign of weakness happening in here when you just look at it from that perspective, rather than what your brain is used to seeing the same thing over and over and over again. Because what it truly is, of course, is accumulation. And that we're actually in the sign of strength with all of your phases already played out. The last thing is just the markup. But we, of course, have looked at this before, like using Binance Coin as the example of what it's like to be in the sign of strength phase before you get that markup to happen. And my thoughts are that's where we go see the, the $8, $9, $10 price level for XRP, the 4.236 extension on the market cap, all the crazy that ends up happening in there. But you have so many mixed thoughts out there on Twitter and YouTube and all the different narratives and stuff like that. Is this the top, or are we going to $1,000? It's like, one, no, I don't think it's the top, and no, I don't think it's going to $1,000. But this is a very technical, structured play of where the price action could end up topping out at. And if you do that and you go for that type of a measured move where you increase 65% versus the total market cap, or in the case of Bitcoin, about 250% versus Bitcoin. Well, if Bitcoin stayed perfectly flat right now and XRP went up, 238%, that's about $10, right? So, but we've looked at it through this lens before. And in times where the crowd is all real chaotic and not knowing what to think, when you see Bitcoin do some type of back test, the altcoin market has acted very wonky, right? Bitcoin breaks out, then the altcoin market kind of breaks out and back tests during this whole phase in here. Well, sometimes it's nice to just kind of take a step back for half of a second, look at it through this lens and say, what is really happening here on the bigger time frame behavior? And how can we remove some of those biases that we have when we look at the charts or when price action is happening to say, what is that bigger picture? And it's clear as day to me. If we were looking at it from the inverted perspective, this would be distribution. We're working on the sign of weakness phase happening in here. We'd be looking for that big break to come and we'd be looking for that big break to come, right? Without using any type of biases, just looking at it from accumulation and distribution structures, that's what you would be thinking right here, right? But since we know that's inverted, that actually means bull. So just an interesting way to think about things. And it's been a long time since we've done this, where we've taken the biases of our emotions when it comes to price actions of ups or downs, and we just try to look at structures only and say, well, what would we be thinking if we were looking at it upside down? And if you were looking at it upside down, the bias would be in that direction. It's very clear that's what that would be. So I can put all the accumulation charts on here that we want, and I do believe that to be the case. But I figured I'd show you also other ways that I do it, because people ask me a lot, how do you remain emotionally disconnected from a lot of this stuff? And don't get me wrong, there's times where, of course, the emotions come into play, but you got to grab them by the horns and stop them. And this is one of the ways that I like to do it. I say to myself, well, what would I be thinking if I was looking at this from the other direction, right? How biased am I based on which way I want things to go? Or if I want prices to go up, am I doing it just because I want it? Or if I was looking at this in the other direction, what would I be thinking? And if I was looking at this in this direction, I would clearly be thinking that this thing is going to be breaking down. And fortunately for that, with it being upside down, that means to the upside. So still nothing changes in here. Like I don't see how we're going to get to any of these price targets people are talking about with 20, 30, 50, $100,000. Everything I have mathematically still pushes it into that 8, 9, 10. This hopefully gives you a little bit of a clue on how I can see that as well, why 8, 9, 10 is the play, and why I still also think this is just an accumulation schematic in here waiting to play itself out. And when it does, it'll be very exciting. And my thoughts are it's likely going to happen into all of that right in there. It's not going to be what people are thinking, that there's going to be some magical narrative that ends up coming along that causes it. It's going to be the conditions of the market being in play, and that it'll be just very similar to what we've always seen, that this is probably going to be another speculative cycle that we have in here rather than a utility cycle. But I also don't think XRP will be the only winner. I do believe it will be the whole market. And when those conditions are favorable, that's when XRP runs. But there will likely be a lot of winners. So in the short term, of course, with price action, just looking to see that Bitcoin's all good. That was our back test. That was the climatic hit that happened right in there. Now looking for recovery to start to come into play. And then by the time this thing busts out of here, that's when we should start seeing a lot of action transpire into the rest of the market. We'll see how things go once the stock market opens. I told you guys if we had anything crazy going on Saturday, I'd put out a video. I didn't see anything worthy of talking about, so just made a quick little post over here on the community tab on Saturday morning. But now that we've gone ahead and we've hit 112K, now we do have interesting things. We'll see how the market reacts as the stock market opens and if that was actually good enough. So we'll check in on it this week. We'll see what kind of surprises macro throws at us. We still don't have that narrative yet of what it's going to be that triggers retail to be euphoric. I think there will be one. And whatever that narrative ends up being, it ends up being the thing that answers the question of this time is different. And that narrative still is not present, but we're waiting for it to come to fruition. So we'll keep our eyes on it. We'll keep checking in on it. Things look okay throughout the market. And of course, this little idea that I've shown you in here is a lot of times how I look at the market to remove some of my biases. If I thought we were going the opposite direction, what would I be thinking? Clear as day to me. So again, reiterate, still a very exciting time here in the market right now. And my thoughts are probably we'll keep on ramping up all the way into September. But on that note, guys, I hope that you had a great weekend. It's officially August here in the United States. It's like one of the hottest months that we have. Time to get in those last summer vacations before we ramp up and grind throughout the rest of the year. Otherwise, we'll be here throughout all of it. So, all right, that's it, guys. Welcome to a new week. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like, of course, you can check out my newsletter over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. This one was just posted a couple of days ago, talking all about the parabola anatomy, the altcoin rotations, pressure building in macro and majors. It includes a 24-minute audio recording in here that I personally record after I write these. You can, of course, check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. There are links within the descriptions of all of my videos to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com and to bcbacker.com. Otherwise, have a great day, guys, and I'll check in with you soon. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor, but if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.